She wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to stay. But when a stranger walks into your life during the worst rainy night of the year and accidentally sits across from you at a diner booth, and then a man you've never met quietly bleeds for a waitress he doesn't even know, everything you planned stops mattering. This is the story of a blind date that went completely wrong and somehow became the most important night of two people's lives. If a stranger's kindness has ever stopped you cold, you already know how this ends. Like this video, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain started around 6, and by 7 it had turned into the kind of storm that makes you question every decision you've made in the last 24 hours. Ethan Holloway sat in his car in the parking lot of Mercer's Diner, engine off, wipers still going even though there was no point anymore because he wasn't moving. The radio had cut to static 3 minutes ago and he hadn't bothered to change it. He was just sitting there with the static and the rain hammering the roof, and a text from his friend Danny lighting up the screen of his phone for the third time in the past 8 minutes. "She's already inside, man. Don't bail. I swear to God, don't bail." Ethan put the phone face down on the passenger seat. He was 32 years old. He had a daughter named Lily, who was 6.5, and who had fallen asleep on the couch tonight watching a cartoon about a rabbit that ran a bakery, and who had looked so small and so perfectly peaceful that Ethan had stood in the living room doorway for a full 2 minutes, just watching her breathe before he'd finally made himself walk to the car. His babysitter, Mrs. Holt, from next door, had waved him off with the kind of cheerful impatience that older women reserve for men who need to be pushed. "Go," she'd said. "She'll be fine. You need to go be a person for a few hours." He wasn't sure he remembered how to do that. It wasn't depression exactly. It wasn't loneliness in the way that people usually mean it. It was more like exhaustion that had settled into his bones so gradually over the past 3 years that he'd stopped noticing it was there, the way you stop noticing a hum in the walls after a while. He worked as a structural engineer for a mid-sized firm downtown. He dropped Lily off at school at 7:45 every morning and picked her up at 3:15 every afternoon, and in between he drew load-bearing calculations and attended project meetings and ate lunch at his desk more days than not. On weekends they went to the park or the library, or they made pancakes that always came out slightly wrong in ways that Lily thought were hilarious. It was a good life. He knew it was a good life. He just couldn't remember the last time he'd sat across from another adult and talked about something that wasn't work or school schedules or whether Lily was eating enough vegetables. Danny had been on him about this for months. Just one date. One. "She's great, Ethan. She's funny. You'll like her." The woman's name was Mara Finch. She was a physical therapist. She liked hiking and apparently had a very funny podcast about terrible first dates, which Ethan had not listened to because that felt like too much homework. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror, slightly damp from the run from his front door to the car, hair that he'd made an effort with and then unmade with the humidity. He was a reasonably good-looking man in the way that men who don't think much about being good-looking sometimes are: broad shoulders, dark eyes, a jaw that his mother had once called dependable, which he'd found funny at the time and now thought might be the most accurate thing anyone had ever said about him. Dependable. He picked up his phone, typed back, "On my way in." He wasn't going to bail. He wasn't a guy who bailed. He'd promised Danny, and that was that. Mercer's Diner was one of those places that had been there so long it had become invisible to the people who lived around it. The kind of spot that you drove past 1,000 times, and then one day someone took you inside and you thought, "Why haven't I been here before?" Red vinyl booths, checkered tile, a long counter with spinning stools, a chalkboard menu above the register. The kind of place where the coffee came in thick ceramic mugs and the pie was real pie, not the refrigerated kind. It smelled like bacon and something sweet, maybe cinnamon, and underneath that the particular clean, damp smell of a building in a rainstorm. It was about 2/3 full on a Tuesday night. Ethan stood at the entrance for a moment, water dripping from his jacket, scanning the room. Danny had said she'd be in a booth near the back window. Dark hair, red scarf. He found it without much trouble. The woman in the back booth did have dark hair. She was bent over her phone when he spotted her, a takeout cup of something sitting untouched near her elbow, and she was wearing a dark blazer, not a red scarf, and something about the way she was sitting, very upright, very still, the way people sit when they're trying not to look like they're waiting, made him pause for just half a second before he talked himself out of hesitating and walked over. "Mara?" he said. The woman looked up. She had dark eyes and a face that didn't quite rearrange itself into the expression Ethan expected, which would have been relief, or a smile, or the particular slightly nervous brightness of someone who has also been dreading this and is glad the waiting part is over. Instead, for a fraction of a second, she looked caught, like someone who'd been almost asleep on a train and heard their stop called. "Hi," she said, and then, a beat too late. "Sit down." He sat down. "I'm Ethan," he said. "I know," she said, and then seemed to catch herself. "I mean, Danny told me. Your name, obviously." "Right." He picked up the laminated menu that was already on the table, mostly to have something to do with his hands. "Sorry I'm a little late. The rain. It's fine." "Really?" She had her hands wrapped around that cup. She still hadn't touched the drink. "I wasn't waiting long." He looked up. She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not unfriendly, but assessing, the way someone looks when they're trying to make a decision about something. She had a quality of stillness that he couldn't tell if it was confidence or tension. Maybe both. She was objectively very pretty, in a way that was a little intimidating. The kind of pretty that looked like it was used to being looked at and had decided to be unimpressed by it. "So," Ethan said, "Danny says you're a physical therapist." Something shifted in her face. Very small, but he caught it. "Yeah," she said. Yes. That's interesting work." "It is," she agreed, and then she said nothing else. He was a structural engineer. He knew how to recognize when something was load-bearing and when it wasn't, when a structure was solid, and when there was a crack somewhere beneath the surface that was going to cause problems later. This conversation had a crack in it already, and he had no idea where it was. The waitress appeared, young, maybe 19, with a name tag that said Jules in faded capital letters. She had the particular expression of someone who'd been on shift for too long and was maintaining professionalism through sheer willpower. "What can I get you?" she said. "Just coffee," Ethan said. "Thank you." Jules wrote it down and left. Ethan put the menu down. "Listen," he said, "I'll be honest with you. I'm not super good at this. The first date thing, I haven't really done it in a while, so if I seem a little, You're fine," she said. And then, almost to herself, "You seem fine." He wasn't sure if that was reassuring or faintly diagnostic, like she was checking boxes. Jules came back with his coffee. As she set it down, her elbow caught the woman's untouched cup and sent it skidding toward the edge of the table. Both Ethan and the woman grabbed for it at the same time. Their hands met on the cup, warm ceramic, her fingers cool from the air conditioning, and there was a fraction of a second where neither of them moved. "Got it," the woman said. "Sorry," Jules said miserably. "Don't worry about it," the woman said, and her voice was different then, less careful, more natural. "Really? It's fine." Jules gave her a quick, grateful look and retreated. Ethan pulled his hand back. He wrapped both hands around his own mug. "So," he said again, because he apparently only had one opener, do you live nearby, in the neighborhood?" "Not really," she said. "I'm more downtown, near the financial district." "Long way to come for a blind date." "It is," she said. And again, that slight hesitation, like she was choosing her words from a menu. "What about you?" "About 15 minutes from here. I've got a daughter, so I try to stay close to home when I can." He watched her process that. "How old?" 6.5. She'd be very upset if I left out the half. For the first time, something in her face opened up a little. A real reaction, not a managed one. The half matters a lot at that age. "It matters enormously," he agreed. "Everything matters enormously at that age. The specific YouTube channel, the exact type of crackers, whether her socks have the right kind of seam on the toes. It's a lot of extremely high-stakes detail management." She laughed. It was short, caught off guard, and it changed her whole face, made her look younger, made her look like someone who forgot to be careful for a second. He noticed he wanted to make her do it again. Here is what Ethan did not know. sitting across from her in that booth with his coffee going slightly cold. Her name was not Mara. Her name was Sienna Vale. She was 30 years old. She was the CEO of a marketing and brand strategy firm called Valen Group, which had 47 employees and clients in 6 countries and an annual revenue that would have made Ethan's jaw drop if she'd told him. She had not been raised to wealth. She'd been raised in a 2-bedroom apartment in a city where winters lasted too long, by a mother who worked double shifts and a father who'd been mostly absent in the way that men sometimes are when they can't figure out how to be present. She had built her company from a freelance consultancy she'd started at 23 with 2 clients and a laptop that kept overheating. She had worked for everything she had, and she was good at it, and she knew she was good at it, and she had learned a long time ago that this made certain people uncomfortable. She was also Danny Holloway's colleague. Danny worked in business development at a firm that sometimes collaborated with Valen Group. They'd met at a conference, become friendly in that particular way of people who run in overlapping professional circles, and 3 weeks ago Danny had cornered her at a networking event and said, "I need a favor. I set my buddy Ethan up on a blind date with this woman Mara, but Mara just texted me 20 minutes ago, and she's stuck in traffic on the expressway, and she doesn't want to stand him up cold, so she asked if someone could go explain in person and keep him company until she gets there." And then he'd looked at Sienna with the specific expression of a man who needs something and knows he's pushing his luck. "You're already in this neighborhood, right? Could you just—" Sienna had said no. She'd said no twice. She was here because Danny had added, "He's a good guy, Sienna. He's had a rough few years. I don't want him sitting alone in a diner thinking he got stood up." And something about that specific sentence, the image of someone sitting alone in a booth thinking they'd been forgotten, had moved something in her that she didn't have a name for. She'd planned to stay 15 minutes, explain the situation, keep him company, make sure he was all right until Mara arrived. She had not planned for him to say, "My daughter would be very upset if I left out the half," in a tone that was both exhausted and completely, genuinely fond. She had not planned on that laugh catching in her throat. She looked at the rain on the window. Mara had texted 20 minutes ago saying she was 40 minutes out. Sienna had the text open in her phone under the table. "I should tell him," she thought. She looked back at him. He was turning his coffee mug in slow circles on the table. Not nervously, just absently, the way people do when they're thinking. There was something in the set of his shoulders that she recognized, the particular posture of someone who is trying very hard and tired of trying and doing it anyway. "So what do you do?" he asked. "Your work. Is it—" "I run a company," she said. "What kind?" "Brand strategy, marketing. We help businesses figure out what they're trying to say and how to say it." "That sounds like something that requires knowing what you think before you open your mouth," he said, "which is a skill I consistently underperform on." "You're doing fine," she said, and meant it more than she expected to. "Yeah, but I've been saying so approximately every 45 seconds, which is a crutch I hate about myself and can never seem to fix." She laughed again, longer this time. "I say exactly too much in meetings, like someone says something obvious and I say exactly like they've just cracked a code." "Exactly," he repeated with exaggerated gravity. "Yes. Thank you. That was a very good point. Stop. That's exactly what it sounds like." He smiled. It was a good smile, not the practiced kind. "What do you actually like about it?" he said. "Your work." She blinked. People didn't usually ask that. They asked what she did, and when she told them, they responded with either impressed silence or a follow-up question about money or clients. They did not ask what she liked about it. Actually figuring out what someone is trying to say," she said slowly. "When a company comes to me and they've been around for 20 years and they can't explain why anyone should care about them, and you dig in and find the thing they've never managed to articulate, there's something satisfying about that, finding the honest thing under all the noise." He was listening, really listening, not waiting to talk, listening. "What's the honest thing?" he said. "Under all your company's noise. If someone asked you, why should anyone care about Sienna?" He stopped, blinked. "Sorry, what's your name? You haven't actually said it." She had not said it because she had been avoiding saying it, because the moment she said her name, the logic of the situation would start to unravel. "I'm Sienna, not Mara. I'm not your date. I'm just a woman who felt bad about leaving you alone in a diner. Sienna, she said. Sienna, he repeated. Why should anyone care about Sienna? He waited. Vale, she said. Why should anyone care about Sienna Vale? She looked at him. The rain was loud on the roof. Someone 2 booths over had started telling a loud story involving a road trip and a broken-down trailer. I haven't thought about it in a while, she said. That's a little alarming, actually. You've been too busy running things to figure out what you're running for? That's an extremely simple way to put something that's correct. She looked at him again. Maybe. He picked up his coffee. I think about that a lot, he said. Running things. I'm a structural engineer, which basically means I spend all day making sure buildings don't fall down, which is an important job that sounds very boring at dinner parties. It doesn't sound boring. Most people's eyes glaze over around the time I mention load distribution. I don't know what that is. It's exactly what it sounds like. Weight. How weight gets distributed through a structure, what it can hold, where the pressure points are, whether it's going to hold. He looked at his coffee. I like it because it's honest. A building either holds or it doesn't. The math is either right or it's wrong. There's a clarity to it. That sounds restful, she said. Having a job where you know if you got it right. Yeah, well, he set the mug down. Other parts of life are less cooperative. She didn't ask what he meant. She thought she knew. She thought about the way he'd said my daughter. Not with complaint, but with the particular weight of something you've carried long enough that it's become part of how you hold yourself. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. Why did you agree to this? She went still. The date, he said. The blind thing. Danny's pretty persistent, I know that, but he said you'd agreed. He wasn't being interrogative. He was genuinely curious, with that same listening quality. I'm wondering what it costs someone to say yes to this kind of thing. Because for me, it costs a significant amount of convincing myself. She should tell him now. This was the moment. She had approximately 15 logical seconds to say, actually, I need to explain something. I'm not who you think I am. I didn't want someone to sit alone, she said instead. He looked at her for a moment. That's it? That's it. He nodded slowly. That's a good reason, he said. Outside, the storm was getting worse. Sienna could hear it intensifying. The rain had gone from steady to aggressive, the kind that bounced back up off the pavement in little white bursts. The windows of the diner were completely opaque now, just moving gray. She checked her phone under the table. Mara had texted again. Expressway is a nightmare. Probably another hour. So sorry. Tell him I'm coming? Sienna looked at that text for a long moment. She should tell him. She typed the beginning of a response to Mara. Okay, I'll explain everything. And then stopped. Looked up at Ethan, who was reading the dessert menu with a faintly serious expression, like it was a document he was trying to determine the structural integrity of. Do you actually want dessert? She said. I want pie, he said, but I feel like pie at the beginning of a first date is a power move I haven't earned yet. She laughed and put her phone away. She'd tell him in a minute. They talked about books. It started when she glanced at the bag he'd dropped by his feet, a canvas tote with the logo of a bookstore she knew, a small independent place called Callaway's on the east side of town, and she said, almost without thinking, Is that from Callaway's? He looked surprised. You know it? I used to go there every Saturday when I first moved to the city, she said, before I got busy enough that I forgot it existed, which is a tragedy. A real tragedy, she agreed. I take Lily there sometimes. She goes straight to the back room. They have this little kids section with these tiny low shelves and a beanbag chair that's been there since approximately 1987. She'll sit back there for an hour. What does she read? Right now it's anything with animals. Dogs, mostly. Last week she cried for 45 minutes because of a book about a dog who finds a family, which was explicitly a happy book. She just couldn't handle the emotional volume of it. 6-year-olds don't have any filters, Sienna said. Whatever they feel the whole thing. All the way to the floor, he agreed. It's exhausting to watch sometimes. It's also... He stopped. Oh no, it's something. What? She'll feel something and she'll just say it. She'll come home from school and say, Daddy, I was sad today at lunch because nobody sat with me and I ate my sandwich and it made me feel like a rock. And I'll think, I didn't feel that clearly about anything until I was 28. Sienna was quiet for a moment. What happened at 28? She watched him decide something, the same decision she kept not making about herself. My wife left, he said, flatly, not dramatically. We'd been married 2 years. Lily was 9 months old. He turned his mug in the circle again. It wasn't cruelty. She just realized she'd said yes to a life she didn't actually want. Better to do it then than later. I think that's right, actually. I still think that's right. But it was a lot, Sienna said. Yeah. He looked up. A lot. Did you know before she said so? I knew something. I didn't know what. He paused. I kept looking at the structure and thinking, this seems sound. What am I missing? And then the answer was, everything. She looked at him. There was no self-pity in his voice, just the plain accounting of a man who'd taken stock of something difficult and filed it accurately. What does she read? Sienna said. You. At Calloway's. He smiled. The shift was almost visible, like a physical thing, the deliberate turn away from the heavier topic. Right now, I'm reading a history of bridges. She stared. Of bridges. Of bridges. Specifically famous ones. The Golden Gate, Brooklyn, Milo Viaduct. The disasters, the near disasters. He saw her expression and added, I work with structures all day. I come home and read about structures. It's a character flaw. It's not a flaw, it's just very specific. What do you read? Lately, quarterly reports. He looked at her with a straight face. Those aren't books. No, she agreed. They're not books. What did you used to read before the quarterly reports? She thought about it. Short stories, she said. I liked short stories. You could read one on a lunch break and feel like you'd gone somewhere. She looked at the table. I haven't read a short story in probably 3 years. That is actually a tragedy, he said, and he didn't say it unkindly. I know. Jules came back around and asked if they wanted anything else. Ethan asked for a refill. Sienna, without quite deciding to, asked for a slice of whatever pie they had. Jules said cherry. Sienna said that was fine. Jules brought the pie and 2 forks without being asked, which was the kind of small, thoughtful thing that goes unnoticed until you notice it. She's been running since we got here, Ethan said, watching Jules move back toward the counter. Who? The waitress, Jules. She's been on the whole section by herself all night. The other one called out, I think. I heard her telling someone when I walked in. Sienna looked over. He was right. Jules had been handling probably 10 tables since they'd sat down, moving in a permanent controlled hurry, never quite stopping, always with the particular half-smile of someone maintaining cheerfulness through effort. Did you catch that on the way in, or I just noticed things, he said. Then, try the pie. Tell me if it's good. She tried the pie. It's very good, she said. Good. They shared it without discussing it. 2 forks, 1 plate. It was the most natural thing that had happened all evening, and also slightly insane given that she still hadn't told him the truth. She looked at her phone again under the table. Mara. Maybe an hour and a half now. This rain is insane. How's he doing? Sienna. He's fine. He's good. There was a pause, and then Mara sent a string of emojis that Sienna chose not to interpret. The power went out at 8:43. It didn't go all the way out. There was a backup somewhere that kept the emergency lights on, strips of dim yellow along the baseboards, and a few overhead fixtures that dropped to half strength, enough to see by, not enough to see well. The diner went briefly quiet the way places always do when something unexpected happens, that communal inhale of surprise, and then conversation started back up in a slightly lower register. Jules was at the counter when it happened, dealing with a check. A man in a rain-damp jacket at the booth nearest the door. He'd come in about 20 minutes earlier, sat alone, been sending his food back in increments that suggested he was either having a terrible night or was the kind of person who went to restaurants looking for someone to make miserable. Stood up. Hey, His voice was louder than the moment required. Hey, this is ridiculous. I've been waiting on a fresh coffee for 15 minutes, and now the power goes out. Jules turned. I'm sorry, sir. We'll get you sorted out. I just need to. You just need to do your job, the man said. That's what you need to do. You've been ignoring this table all night, and I'm sitting here. Sir, she's working the whole section alone, a woman from a nearby table said, in the tight voice of someone trying to keep a lid on something. Nobody asked you, the man said. He took a step toward Jules. Not threatening, exactly. More like the move of someone who's used to taking up space and wants the room to feel it. I want to talk to your manager. Jules's face was very still. The professional mask she'd been wearing all evening was intact, but something behind it had gone rigid, the way faces go when you're trying not to show something. Of course, Jules said. Let me go get... Don't walk away from me, the man said. The diner went quiet again. Different kind of quiet this time. Ethan put down his fork. Sienna watched him do it, watched his face change. Not into anger, nothing hot or reactive, just a settling, like someone who's decided something and gone calm about it. I'll be right back, he said very quietly. He stood up. She almost grabbed his arm. She didn't. He walked over. Not fast, not slow, not with the posture of someone looking for a confrontation. He stopped a few feet from the man, close enough to speak in a normal volume. Hey, he said. You doing okay? The man turned. He was maybe 45, heavy-set, with the flushed face of someone running on frustration and probably not enough sleep. What? I said, are you okay? You seem like you're having a rough night. The man's expression flickered. He'd clearly been prepared for a different response. This isn't your business. Yeah, probably not, Ethan agreed easily. But she's been running solo all night. The power's out. It's the kind of night where everything goes wrong at once. I get it. But she's doing what she can. I know, Ethan said. I know. It's frustrating. But she didn't cause the rain. Somewhere in that last sentence, something landed. Maybe it was the reasonableness of it. Maybe it was the fact that Ethan said it without any edge, without making the man feel cornered. He hadn't said you're being an idiot. He'd said the rain is no one's fault. And that was both completely true and completely beside the point and somehow exactly right. The man was quiet for a moment. His shoulders dropped about 2 inches. I just want my coffee, he said. Yeah, Ethan said. I know. He looked at Jules. Can we get him a fresh coffee when you've got a second? Jules had a very complicated expression on her face. Of course, she said. The man sat down. Ethan started to turn back. There was a sound, a sharp one, and Ethan made a small surprised noise and pulled his right hand in. Sienna was on her feet without thinking about it. He'd caught the edge of something on the counter as he'd turned, a glass that was sitting too close to the edge, cracked already probably, and he'd clipped it coming back around and it had broken clean. Not a big cut, not deep, but the kind that bleeds immediately and emphatically, the way cuts on the hand always do. She was already moving. She'd grabbed a handful of napkins from the dispenser on their table, and she reached him just as he looked down at his hand with a mildly exasperated expression, like he'd spilled something on himself. Here, she said. It's fine, he said. Give me your hand. He gave her his hand. She pressed the napkins against the cut and held them there. His hand was warm, much larger than she expected, and he didn't pull away. He stood there in the dim emergency lighting, letting her hold his hand with both of hers, and for a moment neither of them said anything. That was a nice thing you did, she said. It was just talking. Most people don't. He looked down at their hands. Most people could, though. She thought about that. The simplicity of it. The fact that he said most people could, instead of I'm not like most people, which is what a certain kind of man would have said in exactly this moment. How bad is it? He said. She checked under the napkins, still bleeding, but slowing. Not terrible. Do they have a first aid kit? Jules? He called, not loud. Any chance there's a first aid kit back there? Jules appeared with one inside of 30 seconds, which suggested it was either very accessible or she'd been watching and anticipated. She handed it over with an expression that contained a significant amount of feeling that she was clearly not going to verbalize at work. Thank you. Ethan said to her. "Thank you," Jules said, and walked away fast. Sienna opened the kit. There was antiseptic, gauze, tape. She cleaned the cut while Ethan held still, which he did without complaint or commentary, and taped the gauze down in a way that was competent if not beautiful. "You've done this before," he said. "I've patched up a lot of things," she said. "Me too." He flexed his fingers carefully, experimentally. "Good as new." "Not quite." "Close enough." He looked at her. The emergency lighting was casting everything in shades of amber, which should have been unflattering and somehow wasn't. "Thank you, Sienna." She looked at him. The way he said her name, like it was just a name, like she was just a person, like the evening had not been strange and complicated and full of things left unsaid, but had instead been exactly what it looked like. Two people in a diner, having a conversation, figuring each other out. "I need to tell you something," she said. He waited. He was good at waiting. "I'm not," she started. The bell above the door rang. They both looked. The woman who came in was shaking water off a red scarf, a very specific red scarf, the color of something deliberate, and scanning the room with the slightly wild expression of someone who'd been driving through a hurricane for 90 minutes and wasn't sure if they'd arrived in time. Her eyes found the back booth, found it empty, scanned and found Ethan standing near the counter with his hand bandaged and a woman standing next to him holding a first aid kit. Mara Finch was 31 years old, dark-haired, red scarf wearing, and clearly very bright. Sienna could see her taking in the situation in about 4 seconds, the whole picture. The closeness, the bandage, the first aid kit, the fact that Sienna was still holding Ethan's hand without either of them having noticed. Sienna let go of his hand. Mara's gaze moved to Sienna. There was no anger in it, more the expression of someone recognizing an unexpected narrative. Ethan followed Sienna's gaze to the door. He looked at the red scarf. He looked back at Sienna. She watched him understand. It happened in stages, like a calculation working itself through. The name Mara, the scarf Danny had mentioned, the fact that Sienna had never quite confirmed who she was, the particular way she'd said, "I didn't want someone to sit alone." His expression was very hard to read. She braced for something. Confusion, embarrassment, a flash of feeling deceived. What came instead was a quiet breath, and then, "How long have you known?" "Since I sat down," she said. I was going to tell you she was late, and then you asked about my work," she said, "and I forgot to leave." He looked at her for a long moment in the amber light of the backup generator with his bandaged hand at his side and the rains tearing itself apart outside and Mara Finch standing 15 feet away, processing whatever story she was telling herself about this scene. Then, very slightly, something in his face shifted. Not a smile, not yet, just an adjustment. The look of a man who's decided something is interesting. "And then," he said. She looked at him. "I'd like to tell you about it," she said. "Somewhere. Not tonight, necessarily, but somewhere." The pause stretched out, not uncomfortable, just waited. "I know a bookstore," he said. She laughed. It was the third time she'd laughed, and it still surprised her. "I know you do," she said. Outside, the rain was finally beginning to let up, not stopping. Just finding its lower gear, the kind of rain that had settled in for the evening and was no longer in a hurry. The power would come back on in another 12 minutes. Jules would bring the man his coffee, and he would leave a $20 bill under the cup without saying anything about it. Mara Finch would end up at the counter with a piece of pie, telling Jules she'd had a night, and Jules would say, "Tell me about it." But none of that had happened yet. Right now it was just Ethan and Sienna standing near the counter of a diner in a storm, figuring out if the thing that had happened between two strangers in a bad luck evening was the kind of thing that meant something. Neither of them had an answer for that. They were both going to find out. Mara Finch had good manners. That was the first thing Sienna thought, watching her cross the diner toward them with wet hair and a red scarf, and the particular composure of someone who has assessed a situation and decided to be gracious about it. "You must be Ethan," Mara said, and she said it warmly, without a flicker of the awkwardness the moment deserved. Then she looked at Sienna. "And you're the person Danny sent." Sienna said. I'm sorry, I should have explained earlier. It's fine. Mara looked between them. She was reading the room the way perceptive people do, quickly, without making it obvious. I can see you were keeping him company. There was the faintest possible emphasis on company, not unkind, just precise. Ethan cleared his throat. The storm, he said, which wasn't a complete sentence but served as one. It's been a night. I drove through a wall of water on the expressway, Mara said. There was a minivan sideways across 2 lanes. Everyone was fine, but... She shook her head. Anyway, I made it. She looked at Ethan's bandaged hand. What happened? Broken glass, he said. It's nothing. Mara looked at the bandage, then at Sienna, then back at Ethan. Something was happening in her face that was too complicated to read in dim lighting. Well, she said, I'm glad you weren't alone. The 3 of them stood there in the particular silence of a situation that has no manual. It was Ethan who finally said, Do you want to sit down? We were about to get more coffee. Mara looked at him for a moment. Actually, she said slowly, I think I'm going to get something to go. The drive-in was... I'm kind of wrecked. She paused. Rain check? Sure, Ethan said. Of course. She nodded once, looked at Sienna. It was nice to sort of meet you, she said, which was the most diplomatically worded thing Sienna had heard in recent memory. Then she turned and walked toward the counter, and Jules materialized to take her order with the automatic competence of someone who had seen stranger things tonight and was just keeping the line moving. Ethan and Sienna stood where they were. Well, Sienna said. Yeah, Ethan said. Neither of them moved toward the door. More coffee, he said. She looked at him. He had his hands in his jacket pockets, the bandaged one and the unbandaged one, and he was watching her with an expression she was starting to be able to read. That particular stillness that meant he was waiting to see what she decided, not pushing either way. Sure, she said. Yeah, okay. They went back to the booth. The power came back on at 9:15, which the whole diner greeted with a brief collective exhale and the return of the background music. Something soft and indistinct, the radio station that diners always seem to have running at a frequency just below the level of notice. The overhead lights came up to full, and the room got brighter and louder, a little of the strange amber intimacy of the last half hour dissolving into ordinary Tuesday night. Ethan looked at Sienna across the table in the full light. She looked different than she had in the dim, which he supposed made sense. More herself, maybe. More defined. She had the kind of face that in a photograph would have looked impressive, composed, a little remote, and in person kept doing things that the photograph would have missed, small movements in the eyes, the way the corner of her mouth moved when she was deciding whether to say something. Can I ask you something? He said. You've asked me that already tonight. I'm going to keep asking it. She made a small gesture. Go ahead. What were you going to do? If the storm had been worse and Mara had canceled completely, were you just going to sit here all night and not say anything? She considered this with more seriousness than he expected. I don't know, she said. I think I kept planning to say something and then not doing it. Why not? She looked at the table, then back at him. Because the conversation was good, she said, and I didn't want to watch you leave. He sat with that for a moment. It was the kind of honest thing that people usually only say after knowing each other a long time, if at all. She'd said it plainly, without dressing it up, and the plainness of it was the most disarming thing about her. Okay, he said. Okay. That's an honest answer. I appreciate honest answers. She looked faintly relieved, which surprised him. Most people find it abrasive. Most people are wrong. Jules came back with fresh coffee and a look on her face that said she had noticed all of the evening's developments and had strong opinions about them that she was professionally declining to share. She refilled their mugs and was gone again in the way of someone with too much work to linger. Tell me something true, Ethan said. Sienna blinked. What? Something true about you that you don't say at work or at whatever events you go to. Something that doesn't show up in the version of you that runs a company. She was quiet for long enough that he thought she might not answer. Then she said, I can't sleep past 5:30 in the morning. Hasn't mattered what time I go to bed since I was about 25. I just wake up and that's it. She turned her mug slightly. I used to think it was stress. Now I think it's just how I'm wired. 5:30, eyes open, brain on. And for a while I used to try to read or meditate or whatever people do to recalibrate. But mostly I just get up and work. She looked at him. I haven't taken a vacation in 4 years. 4 years, he repeated. I know. Where would you go? If you did. She looked slightly thrown by the question, like she'd prepared for a reaction and gotten a different one. Honestly, I don't know. I used to want to go to Portugal. I read something about Lisbon when I was in college, and I thought, that's the city. And I just never... She stopped, shook her head. I never went. What stopped you? The company, and then the company, and then the company after that. There will always be a company. I know that too. He looked at her. Tell me something else. Your turn, she said. I've gone twice. He thought about it. The kind of thinking that's actually thinking, not performing the shape of it. I can cook exactly 4 things, he said. Pasta with the jarred sauce that Lily likes, scrambled eggs, grilled cheese, and a chicken soup that takes all day and comes out different every time. I make it from my mom's recipe, but I've lost the card it was written on, and I've been reconstructing it from memory for 2 years, and I'm not sure I've gotten it right yet. He paused. She died. My mom. 4 years ago, right before Lily was born. So she never... He stopped. Not with grief, exactly. With the plain weight of it. She never met her. Sienna was quiet. I'm sorry, she said. And she said it without the usual furniture that people put around those words. Not, I'm so sorry for your loss, or that must have been so hard. Just those 2 words, direct and clean. Yeah, he said. Me too. He picked up his coffee. The soup is actually getting closer, I think. Lily ate 2 bowls of it last week and said it tasted like a hug, which, he laughed a little, which I'm going to count as high praise. It tastes like a hug, Sienna repeated. That's the best review I've ever heard. She's a good critic, very specific. She told me last month that a book I read her was loud in a quiet way, which I've been thinking about ever since. What does that mean? I have no idea, but it's correct. Sienna looked at him with an expression he couldn't entirely name, like she was seeing something come into focus that had been slightly blurred before. You talk about her a lot, she said. I know, sorry. Don't. She shook her head. I like it. It's... She paused, choosing. It's not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. I've been to a lot of dinners, work things, set up things, networking things. People usually talk about what they do. They don't usually talk about soup. Most people's soup is less interesting. She laughed. 3rd time, he'd lost count somewhere after 3, which was a good sign. What's her name? Lily. How did you pick it? My mom loved Lily of the Valley, grew it in the garden. When I found out we were having a girl, it was the only name that felt right. He said it without sentimentality, just as a fact, but it was the kind of fact that had the whole weight of something behind it. Sienna was quiet for a moment. Then, that's a good reason for a name. I think so. The rain outside had gone from aggressive to steady. Not comfortable exactly, but no longer the kind of storm that feels personal. Outside the window, the parking lot lights were reflecting in the standing water on the asphalt, making everything look like a mirror version of itself. How long have you been running Valen Group? Ethan asked. 7 years? She said it without particular pride, just the number. Since you were 23, 22 technically, I incorporated at 22 and a half. A faint smile. The half matters. He pointed at her. See? Okay, fine. She sat back. 7.5 years. What was the hardest year? She didn't have to think about it. Year 3, she said immediately. We lost our 2 biggest clients in the same month. One of them just cut the whole consultancy budget, nothing personal, new CFO, everything streamlined. The other one, She stopped. The other one told me they decided to bring everything in-house, which I later found out wasn't true. They just hadn't liked something I'd said in a meeting. What did you say? I told them their campaign was dishonest. He raised an eyebrow. Was it? Yes. They were marketing a product as eco-friendly using numbers that were technically legal and completely misleading. I said it in a meeting and I said it directly and they cut us 2 weeks later. She looked at the table. I've always thought that was the right call. But year 3 with 2 fewer clients, I wasn't so sure every single night. But you didn't go back and tell them what they wanted to hear. No? She said it simply. Good. She looked at him. You don't know me well enough to say that. I know that about you, he said. That's enough for tonight. She didn't argue with it, which he counted as a win. Boom. At 9:55, Ethan looked at his phone for the first time since sitting back down, and the string of texts from Mrs. Holt told a story. Lily had woken up at 9, discovered the Rabbit Bakery cartoon had ended, and was now awake and insisting that she couldn't sleep unless Daddy called to say goodnight. He held up the phone so Sienna could see the texts without reading them. She read them anyway. You should go, she said. Yeah. He was already doing the math. 20 minutes home, bedtime ritual, get Lily back down. I should. He didn't move immediately. I'm sorry. I'd like to... Don't apologize, she said. She needs her dad. That's not something to apologize for. He looked at her. Something in the way she said she needs her dad, not dismissive, not impatient, but specific and genuine in a way that said she understood what she was saying and meant it. He got out his wallet. She put her hand on the table. I've got this, she said. You don't, Ethan. She said his name with a patience that was faintly amused. I came here under false pretenses. Let me buy the coffee. He considered arguing, decided against it. The pie too, he said. The pie too. He stood up, put on his jacket, slightly damp still, probably cold by now. He looked down at her, at the half-eaten pie on the plate between them, at the 2 coffee mugs, at the first aid kit still sitting on the edge of the table. Callaway's, he said. The bookstore. I take Lily Saturday mornings usually, but... He stopped. I sometimes go by myself on Wednesday evenings, after work. If you wanted to... This Wednesday? She said. Or next. Whenever. She looked at him for a second. Then, this Wednesday. Okay. He pulled his jacket closed. This Wednesday. He was at the door before he turned back. She was still in the booth, hands around the coffee mug, watching him with an expression that was open in a way he hadn't seen on her face for most of the evening. Like something had been set down, not just this moment, but in general, something she'd been carrying that she'd forgotten she was carrying. He raised a hand. She raised one back. Outside, the rain was letting up. Mom, he called Lily from the car before he started the engine. She picked up on the first ring, which meant she'd been holding the phone. Daddy. Hey, Bug. You're late. Not accusatory, just reporting. I know. I'm coming home now. 10 minutes. Mrs. Holt made me brush my teeth twice because I forgot the first time. That's correct. That's the rule. Silence on the line. The comfortable kind. Then, Daddy, do you want to know what I dreamed? You haven't gone to sleep yet. I know, but I was thinking about what I dream about, and it was a dog that could fly and lived in a cloud. Was it a good cloud? The best cloud. It had a hammock. He sat in the parking lot of Mercer's Diner with the engine off and the rain going quiet on the roof. That sounds like a really good dream, he said. Daddy? Yeah? Did you have a good time? He looked out through the windshield at the rain-slicked asphalt, at the diner windows lit up warm, at the faint silhouette of someone still in the back booth, hands around a mug. Yeah, he said. I think I did. Good, Lily said, with the authority of someone 6.5 years old and completely certain of her own judgment. Mrs. Holt said you needed to go be a person. Mrs. Holt is right. She's usually right. Are you coming? I'm coming. He started the engine. Mamt. He called Danny from the front steps of his house, which was stupid because the call took 12 minutes and it was raining and he was getting wet, but he made it anyway. Danny answered on the third ring. Well, did you know she was there? A pause. What? Sienna. Did you know she was there when you texted me she's already inside? Longer pause. I mean, Danny. Okay, listen. Mara texted me that she was going to be late and I panicked, and I asked Sienna to go and sit with you, and she said no, and I said please, and you texted me she's already inside as if Sienna was Mara. I mean, technically she was inside. Danny, look, I didn't want you to bail. I know how you are. If I'd said the actual date is stuck in traffic, but a different woman is going to go keep you company, you would have said forget it and gone home. He thought about that. It was probably true. That's not the point. What's the point? He stood on his wet front steps. I don't know yet, he said, which was the most honest answer he had. Danny was quiet for a moment. Then, so how was she? Ethan looked up at the sky. The rain had stopped almost entirely, leaving just the drip from the gutters and the smell of wet concrete. She told me a company was dishonest to their face, he said, and then lost the contract. Yeah, that sounds like her, Danny said. You could have just told me that. You wouldn't have gone. He thought about that too, thought about sitting in the parking lot not wanting to go in, thought about the canvas tote bag from Callaway's, thought about a dog that could fly and lived in a cloud, and a woman in a booth who'd forgotten she was supposed to leave. Good night, Danny, he said. Wait, are you going to see her again? Good night, Danny. He heard Danny say something triumphant and unintelligible as he ended the call. Inside, Lily was asleep on the couch with the phone still in her hand. He lifted her gently. She made a small sound but didn't wake, and carried her to her room and tucked her in and sat on the edge of her bed for a minute in the dark. He thought about what Sienna had said. I forgot to leave. He thought about how sometimes a thing happened that you hadn't planned for, and you could feel the structure of your life shifting slightly under the weight of it, not breaking, just adjusting, redistributing load, finding a new configuration that might be stronger than the one before it. He didn't know yet. He had no way of knowing. He turned off Lily's lamp, went to the kitchen, stood in front of the sink with a glass of water he didn't really want, looking at the dark window above it, at the reflection of the kitchen behind him and the empty space that was just a kitchen, but had sometimes, on certain nights, felt like evidence of everything he hadn't figured out how to fix. Tonight, it just looked like a kitchen. He drank the water, went to bed, lay in the dark for a while, not restless, just present, which was different, which was something he hadn't felt in a while. Wednesday, he thought. Sienna sat in the parking lot of Mercer's Diner for longer than she needed to. She'd paid the bill, coffee, pie, Ethan's original coffee, the refills, and Jules had said thank you for tonight in a way that meant something more than the transaction, and Sienna had said you did great, and Jules had shrugged with the bone-tired eloquence of someone at the end of a very long shift. Now she was in her car with the heat running and her phone in her hand and the text from her assistant director queued up. 6 of them, various levels of urgency, the ordinary demands of a company that didn't stop requiring her just because she was at a diner in a rainstorm. She opened them, read through, typed 3 responses that would hold things until morning, closed the app. She sat there. She thought about the way he'd walked toward that man at the counter. No announcement, no drama, just that quiet settling and the movement forward. She thought about, I know. The rain is no one's fault, which was such a completely simple thing to say and had somehow worked. She thought about most people could, though, and what it meant to say that, not I'm different from most people, but this is available to everyone, which means I expect more. She thought about Lily of the Valley. She thought about Lisbon. She opened her contacts and scrolled to Danny Holloway and typed, You set me up. He replied in 40 seconds. Did it work? She stared at that. Did it work? As if the evening had been a mechanism with a function, a predictable output. As if she hadn't been sitting in a diner booth for 2.5 hours, not wanting to leave. She put the phone in the cup holder. She started the car. The drive back downtown took 40 minutes with the wet roads, and she made it without music, which she almost never did. She usually had something running in the background, a podcast, a playlist, something to fill the space. Tonight she drove in silence and thought about nothing specific, and that was unusual enough that she noticed it. Her apartment was on the 14th floor of a building that had a lobby with marble floors and a doorman named Carlos, who had been there for 11 years and who always said good evening, Ms. Vale, regardless of what time it actually was. She liked Carlos. She never asked him enough questions. She went up, poured a glass of water, stood at the window and looked at the city below, all the lights and wet streets, the particular shimmer of a city after rain. 5:30 tomorrow, eyes open, brain on. She thought about what Ethan had said. There will always be a company. She stood at the window for a while. Then she went to her bookshelf, which was mostly business titles and a few reference books and a small precarious stack of things she'd meant to read since approximately forever. And she found, behind a copy of a marketing strategy book she'd used in a seminar 3 years ago, a collection of short stories. She'd bought it at an airport and read 2 of the stories on the flight and meant to finish it and then hadn't. She took it to the couch, sat down, opened it. She read until midnight, which was 2 hours longer than she'd planned. Wednesday came faster than either of them expected, which was perhaps the clearest sign that both of them had been counting. Ethan got to Callaway's at 6:15, which was 15 minutes earlier than he'd said, which he told himself was because parking in this part of the east side was unreliable, and not because he'd been watching the clock since 4. He stood outside for a moment under the green awning with the store name stenciled in faded gold, Callaway's Books and Company, established 1974, and looked at the window display, which was the same as it always was, a rotating arrangement of staff picks and a hand-lettered sign and a lamp with a slightly crooked shade that had been slightly crooked for as long as he could remember. Whoever ran the displays had strong opinions about coziness. He'd always liked that. He went inside, said hello to the man at the register, Owen, mid-50s, who had worked here as long as Ethan had been coming and who communicated primarily through brief nods and very occasionally a one-sentence opinion about whatever you were buying. Owen nodded. Ethan nodded back. He picked up a copy of something from the new releases table that he had no intention of buying and stood in the fiction section pretending to read the back cover. Sienna arrived at 6:27. He knew it was her before he saw her because the small bell above the door rang and Owen said, in his usual near silence, "Evening," which was more than he usually offered, which meant the person coming through the door had said something to him first. Ethan turned. She was in work clothes still, a dark blazer, a silk shirt, the kind of heels that should have been wrong for a bookstore on a Wednesday, and somehow weren't, with a canvas bag over one shoulder and her hair slightly wind-disrupted, like she'd walked faster than planned. She was scanning the store with the particular expression of someone who used to know a place and is checking if it still matches their memory of it. It clearly did, because something in her face relaxed. She found him in the fiction section. "You're already here," she said. "Parking was fine," he said. She looked at the book in his hand. "Are you actually reading that?" He looked at it. "No." She almost smiled. "Hi, Ethan." "Hi, Sienna." They stood there a moment, the way you stand when you've been thinking about seeing someone, and now they're here, and the version of them in your head has to reconcile itself with the actual person in front of you. She looked a little different in full light on a Wednesday evening than she had in the emergency lighting of a diner during a rainstorm. Still composed, still the kind of person who filled a room without trying. But there were things he hadn't fully clocked on Tuesday. The small crease between her brows that appeared when she was thinking, the way she held her shoulders slightly too high, the faint evidence of a day that had run long. "Long one," he said. "Is it that obvious?" "Shoulders," he said. She reached up, caught herself, lowered them deliberately. "I have a 4 o'clock that runs until 6 every Wednesday. Budget review. It's a lot of numbers said by people who could have emailed. Why don't you end it earlier?" "Because if I end it before 6, someone always adds something." She looked around the store. "Can we just walk around for a bit? Before we figure out where to sit or whatever. I haven't been in here in a long time and I want to—" "Yeah," he said. "Come on." They spent 40 minutes in the stacks before they sat down anywhere. Not with any agenda. Just moving through the sections, fiction, history, The narrow travel aisle that smelled like old paper, the science section that Ethan always lingered in longer than made sense. He pulled things off shelves and handed them to her without explanation, things he'd read or things Lily had brought home or things he'd been meaning to get to. She looked at them seriously, the way people look at things when they're actually paying attention, reading the first page of each one and not pretending to read it. Once she handed something back and said, "I read this on a plane 4 years ago and cried at baggage claim." And he said, "Good or bad crying?" And she said both somehow. And he said he was going to read it this week. She stopped in front of the travel section and looked at the Portugal shelf for a long moment without saying anything. "Go," he said. She pulled a book out, thick color photos, the kind of travel book that's more honest document than advertisement. She stood there turning pages. "There's a neighborhood called Alfama," she said. "It's the oldest part of the city, built on a hill, all these narrow streets that don't make any geographic sense. I read about it when I was 19, and I thought, that's the kind of place you go when you need to figure something out." "What did you need to figure out when you were 19? "Everything," she said simply. "I was 19. She put the book back. Then, after a beat, took it out again and held it. They ended up at the small cafe corner in the back of the store. 2 armchairs that didn't match, a low table, an overhead light that was doing its best. Ethan got 2 coffees from the counter, and she was already sitting with the Portugal book open across her knees when he came back, reading with the absent focus of someone who's forgotten to perform not caring. He set her cup next to her without interrupting. "Tell me about a project," he said when she looked up. "What kind?" "One you're proud of. That isn't the most famous one or the biggest one. One you think about sometimes when things are bad." She looked at him. That question-assessing look again. "Why that one?" "Because that's the one that means something." She was quiet for a moment. Then, 3 years ago. Small client. A family bakery, 3rd generation, 2 locations, genuinely good product. Couldn't explain to anyone why they were different from every other family bakery that's ever existed. She wrapped her hands around the cup. They'd tried 2 agencies before us. Both of them came in with these big polished decks about brand identity and market positioning, and they're a bakery, a 60-year-old bakery. The grandmother still comes in on Saturdays to supervise the bread. "What did you do differently?" "I went in and I ate bread," she said, "for about 4 hours. And I asked the grandmother, her name was Elsa, I asked her what she thought about when she made it, and she said, 'I think about whether the person eating it is going to feel less alone.'" Sienna looked at her cup. "And that was it. That was the whole thing. We built everything around that. Not the product, not the heritage, not the Instagram aesthetic. Just, this bread is for when you need to feel less alone." "Did it work?" "They opened 2 more locations in 18 months. She said it without triumphalism, just fact. "But that's not the part I remember. The part I remember is Elsa sending us a loaf of bread in the mail. Just a loaf of bread in a paper bag with a note that said thank you for listening." He was looking at her. "You kept the note. How do you know that?" "You talked about the bread like it was past tense and the note like it was present." She blinked. "I kept the note," she said. He picked up his coffee. "That's a good project." "Yeah," she said. "It was." There was a quiet stretch, not uncomfortable. The kind of quiet that settles in when people have said something real and are letting it be real without immediately covering it with more words. The store had a few other customers moving through, unhurried, with the particular ease of people in bookstores, which is one of the few places left where everyone implicitly agrees to slow down. "What's Lily like?" Sienna asked. He looked up. He'd been half looking at a shelf of paperbacks across from them, the automatic habit of someone who is always vaguely casing the shelves. He thought about it, not the easy answer, the one he gave to people who asked as pleasantry. "She's very serious about things she cares about and completely indifferent to things she doesn't. She'll spend 45 minutes arranging her stuffed animals by what she calls their emotional situation and then put her shoes on the wrong feet for 3 weeks because she can't be bothered." He paused. "She asks why about things that I don't have answers to, not always big things. Last week it was, why do crosswalks make that sound? And I actually didn't know, so I looked it up, and it was It was about people who are blind, so they know when it's safe to cross. And she thought about that for the whole walk home. And then at dinner she said, "Daddy, I think the crosswalk is being kind." He stopped. I wrote that down. Sienna was looking at him with that open expression, the one that kept appearing when she forgot to be careful. "You write things down." "In my phone. Just things she says, things I don't want to forget." He shrugged, slightly self-conscious. "It feels important to keep a record." "It is," she said, with a certainty that seemed to come from somewhere specific. She looked at the Portugal book in her lap. "My mother kept a journal for years, notes about ordinary things, things I said when I was little. She gave it to me when I turned 30. She paused. "I've read it twice." "Is she still?" "She's in Michigan. She's good. We talk every Sunday, it's not enough, but it's what the schedule allows right now." She said it in the tone of someone who knows the sentence doesn't quite justify itself. "I'm going to change that." "Everyone says that?" "I know." She met his eyes. "I'm saying I'm going to actually change it." He believed her. He wasn't sure why, given that he'd known her for less than a week in total accumulated hours, but he did. There was something in the way she said things. "I kept the note, I'm going to change it." That was declarative in a way that didn't feel like performance. At 8 o'clock, they walked out of Callaway's into the cooler evening air and stood on the sidewalk without immediately deciding what to do next. Owen had rung up Sienna's purchase, the Portugal book and 2 short story collections, with the same near-silent efficiency, and she'd asked him if he had any recommendations, and he'd said, "Depends what you need." And she'd said something honest, and he'd disappeared for 30 seconds and come back with a slim paperback that he placed on the counter without comment. She'd bought that one too. Now they were outside, and there was a coffee shop 2 doors down and a used record store on the corner, and the evening had that early fall quality of being almost cold enough for a jacket, and not quite. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "I should get back," she said. A beat. "I have a call at 9, she said, which was true and also felt like an incomplete sentence. "Sure," he said. She looked at him. He had the Callaway's bag with the Bridges history in it, and his hands in his pockets, and the same quality of stillness he'd had in the diner. Not pushing, not performing indifference, just waiting to see what was true. 20 minutes, she said. "The coffee shop?" "Yeah," he said. "Okay." Oh, they were there for an hour and 15 minutes. The call at 9 went unanswered. She texted her assistant director at 8:58, rescheduled to tomorrow morning, 7:30, and put her phone in her bag and stopped looking at it. They talked about the kind of things that don't show up on a first date. His father, who was still alive, retired, living in a suburb 2 hours north, who called every other Sunday and whom Ethan had a relationship with that he described as functional and a little sad in a way we've both decided not to examine. Her sister in Atlanta, younger by 3 years, who was married with 2 kids and who had chosen, in Sienna's words, the exact life I thought I didn't want and occasionally catch myself envying. Whether they'd both been happy in their 20s or whether they'd just been busy enough that it hadn't mattered. "I was happy in my mid-20s, Ethan said. "I think. I was working. I'd met Caroline, my ex. Things were moving. It felt like the right direction. I just didn't look carefully at whether I was happy about the things I was moving toward." "What were you moving toward?" "I thought I was building something. Marriage, family, the whole thing, and I was. I just didn't check if we were building the same thing." He turned his cup. "That's a structural error. You don't find out until the load comes on." "Do you regret it?" "Lily, no. Everything about Lily, no." He was clear on that. The rest of it, I don't know if regret is the right word. It was what it was. I just got to 30 with a different life than I'd planned and had to figure out what to do about it. "What did you do?" "I kept going," he said, like it was simple, like it wasn't also the hardest possible thing. She looked at the table. "I'm 30, she said. "I have no idea what I've built." "You built a company." "That's not what I mean." "I know," he said. She looked up. "I've been good at achieving things," she said slowly, like she was thinking it through for the first time, even though the thought was probably old. "I am good at setting a goal and doing what it takes to get there. And I've gotten to a point where I've achieved the things I set out to achieve, and I don't know what the next goal is supposed to be, and everyone around me assumes that's success. And it is, but there's this. She stopped. Gap, he said. Yes. Between the thing you built and the life you wanted to be living inside it. She stared at him. How do you know that? Because I'm an engineer, he said. I've seen a lot of buildings that were technically sound and also felt wrong to be inside. She laughed, short, surprised, and then pressed her lips together like she was trying to control it. That's a very specific metaphor. I told you, I read about bridges. You told me. She shook her head. I've said more to you in 2 evenings than I've said to most people in years. He didn't say me too, but she could see that it was true. Eeki. She met Lily on a Saturday afternoon 3 weeks later, which wasn't planned. Ethan had mentioned he'd be at the park near the East Side Library with Lily after their Saturday Callaway's run. And Sienna had a lunch nearby that ended early, and she'd texted to ask if it was okay to stop by. He'd said yes in the uncomplicated way he said most things. She found them at the duck pond. Lily was crouched at the edge of the path, throwing crackers into the water with total scientific seriousness, one at a time, watching where each one landed. Ethan was behind her with his hands in his jacket pockets, watching her with the easy alertness of someone who's learned to be present without hovering. He saw Sienna first, raised a hand. Lily looked up when Sienna got close. She stood up, brushed cracker crumbs off her hands onto her jeans with an efficient gravity, and looked at Sienna with the direct, unembarrassed assessment that children are still capable of and adults have mostly trained out of themselves. You're Sienna, she said. I am, Sienna said. You're Lily. Yes. Lily looked at Sienna's shoes, but the heels, inappropriate for the park and worn anyway. Those are very tall. They are. Does it hurt? A little. Lily considered this with the expression of a researcher encountering interesting data. Daddy says don't do things that hurt if you don't have to. Your dad's probably right. Lily looked at her father. She said you're right, Daddy. I heard, Ethan said. Lily held out the bag of crackers. Do you want to feed the ducks? The brown one is a bad sharer. I've been watching. Sienna crouched down to Lily's level, which with the heels required more commitment than it looked like, and took a cracker from the bag. Which one's the bad sharer? Lily pointed. That one. He takes extra and then doesn't even eat them all. He just wants to have them. Some people are like that too, Sienna said. Lily gave this solemn consideration. I know, she said. I try not to be. Then she went back to methodically feeding the ducks, having apparently completed whatever assessment she'd been running. Ethan came to stand next to Sienna. She straightened up, which was slightly precarious on the gravel path. How'd I do? She said quietly. She offered you the crackers, he said. That's a good sign? That's the whole sign system, actually. Sienna looked at Lily, who was now narrating something to the ducks in a low, serious voice, correcting the bad sharer when he cut ahead. She's extraordinary, Sienna said. She said it plainly, without the cooing performance that adults sometimes do around children. Just a plain statement. I know, Ethan said, also plainly. They stood there in the afternoon light. She looks like you, Sienna said, around the eyes. Her mother's stubborn streak, though. You say that like you don't have one. He looked at her sideways. I don't. Ethan, you were at Callaway's 15 minutes early. That was about parking. It was not about parking. He was quiet for a moment. Maybe a little stubborn, he said. It was at the coffee shop 2 weeks after the park. Their 4th or 5th meeting by now. Sienna had stopped counting specifically because counting felt like a pressure she didn't want to apply. That things went sideways in the way they periodically did. Sienna was late. Not a little late. 42 minutes, which she'd been texting updates about since minute 20, each text more clipped than the last, the particular compression of someone managing 3 crises on the way to a 4th. She came through the door with her phone still in her hand and her jaw set and sat down across from him and said, I'm sorry, without looking at him. You texted, he said. I knew you were coming. It was a disaster of an afternoon. She put her phone face down. The Kellner account. I can't get into the details, but basically everything that could have been wrong was wrong. And it was a junior account manager's error that I had to clean up personally because if I hadn't, she stopped. You don't need to hear this. I'm listening, he said. It's boring. It's your life. It's not boring. She looked at him. Something in her face was still tight from the day. We lost a pitch, she said. Not the Kellner thing. Separate. The Aldrin campaign, which I've been working on for 6 weeks. We found out this afternoon. They went with someone bigger. I'm sorry. It happens. She said it the way you say things that still hurt, but you've decided you're not going to let show. It happens. It's part of the business. It's just, she pressed her hand flat on the table. 6 weeks. He didn't say anything for a moment. She appreciated that he didn't immediately go to well at least, or I'm sure the next one, or any of the packaging that people use because they don't know how to sit with someone else's bad day. Do you want coffee or something stronger? He said. She looked at him. Do they have something stronger? They have a dessert case. I'm told the chocolate thing in the top left is essentially a controlled substance. She almost laughed. It didn't quite make it. Coffee, she said. Just coffee. He got up and came back with 2 cups and the chocolate thing on a separate plate, which he put between them without comment. She looked at it. I didn't say yes to that. I know. It's there if you want it. He sat down. Tell me the worst part, not the business part. The actual worst part. She looked at her cup. The actual worst part is that I knew, she said. I knew the presentation was wrong. I knew we hadn't found the honest thing yet. The thing that would make the client feel like we actually understood what they were trying to do. I knew it going in, and I went in anyway because we were out of time. She was quiet. I don't do that. I don't go in when I know. Why did you this time? Because I've been... She stopped. She looked at him across the table. Then, carefully, I've been distracted. He held her gaze. Okay, he said. That's not a complaint, she said quickly. I don't mean it as... I know what you mean, he said. Do you? Yeah. He turned his cup. I've been distracted too. I almost emailed the wrong load specs to a contractor last week. I caught it at the last second, which, that's more dangerous than losing a pitch. The building would have been fine, probably. He paused. The point is, yeah, me too. She sat with that for a moment. Me too. The way he said it not as reassurance, but as simple fact. The way he kept doing that, locating himself in the same human weather she was in instead of watching from outside it. I don't know what to do with this, she said. And she meant the afternoon and the lost pitch. And she also meant the 2 of them, and he knew it, and neither of them pretended otherwise. Neither do I, he said. Not entirely. Does that bother you? He looked at her for a moment. Does it bother you? She thought about it. The honest answer, not the managed one. Outside the window, the East Side Street was doing its early evening thing. People walking fast, cabs, the smell of a food cart on the corner. The ordinary motion of a city that doesn't pause for anyone. No, she said. I think that's actually what I like about it. He reached across the table and broke off a piece of the chocolate thing and put it on a napkin in front of her. Try that, he said. Tell me if it's good. She looked at it, looked at him. The diner, 2 months ago. Try the pie. Tell me if it's good. You do this, she said. Do what? Feed me things. You forget to eat when you're stressed, he said. I've noticed. She picked up the piece of chocolate. I'm not stressed right now, she said. I know, but you were 20 minutes ago. She ate the piece of chocolate. It was, as promised, essentially a controlled substance. That's good, she said. Told you. She put her elbow on the table and her chin in her hand and looked at him. Ethan. Yeah? I'd like to not lose any more pitches because I'm thinking about you. He looked back at her. Steady, the way he was steady. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that we stop. Circling this, she said. Whatever we've been doing. The bookstore, the coffee, She made a small gesture. I'd like to know what it is. What you think it is. He was quiet for a moment, not in the way of someone who doesn't know, in the way of someone choosing words carefully. I think it's something I didn't plan for, he said, and I'm not good at things I didn't plan for. I've spent 3 years building a life that's very organized and deliberate, and I know where all the load is, and he stopped. You're a variable I don't have a calculation for. Is that bad? No, he said. He looked at her. It's actually the most interesting thing that's happened to me in a long time. She looked at him across the table. The coffee was going slightly cold. Outside, the city moved. Okay, she said. Okay, he agreed. She ate another piece of the chocolate thing. He didn't say anything about it, just picked up his coffee and watched her with that quiet, particular look, the one she'd first seen in a diner during a rainstorm, the one that said, I am paying attention to you, specifically in a way that most people never quite managed. She didn't know exactly what they were. She knew that she'd rescheduled her 9 o'clock call twice, read 4 short story collections in 6 weeks, bought hiking shoes she hadn't worn yet, and started keeping Sundays free in a way that was becoming a habit. She didn't know exactly what any of that added up to. She was beginning to think she didn't need to calculate it right now. The hiking shoes sat in the box for 3 weeks before Sienna wore them. She'd bought them on an impulse the Saturday after the coffee shop conversation. Walked past a sporting goods store on her way back from a client lunch, stopped, went in, and came out 20 minutes later with trail runners in a color that the salesperson had called burnt cedar, and that Sienna privately thought looked like a person who was trying too hard. She'd put them in the corner of her bedroom and looked at them periodically while getting ready for work, which was the most athletic thing she did with them for the first 2 weeks. The third Saturday in October, Ethan texted at 7:45 in the morning. Lily wants to do the trail at Harmon Ridge. It's about 4 miles. No pressure, but she specifically said you should come, which means she'll remember if you don't. Sienna was already awake. She looked at the text, looked at the shoes in the corner. She texted back, "What do I wear?" The trail was not difficult by any reasonable measure, Seb. Wide enough for 2 people, mostly packed dirt, a moderate elevation that only got serious in the last half mile. Lily, however, approached it like a military operation. She had a small backpack containing her own water bottle, a bag of crackers, a folded piece of paper with a trail map she'd drawn herself from an internet image, and a whistle that she said was for if bears, which Ethan had been unable to talk her out of. She walked slightly ahead of them most of the way, consulting her map with authority, correcting their pace when she felt they were falling behind. She planned this, Sienna said, somewhere around the 2nd mile, keeping her voice low. She's been planning it since Tuesday, Ethan said. There was a whole presentation at dinner, laminated. She laminated it. We have a laminator, don't ask. Sienna looked at the back of Lily's head, the dark hair in 2 slightly uneven braids that Ethan had done himself, the small, serious shoulders, the deliberate pace of someone with a destination. Where did she get the organizational skills? Not from me, Ethan said. You were 15 minutes early to a bookstore. That's different. Is it? He looked at her sideways and didn't argue. The shoes, it turned out, were fine. Better than fine. Sienna noticed halfway through the 2nd mile that she'd stopped thinking about them, which she understood was the point of good gear, and also a small, satisfying thing. The body just moving through the world without complaint. At the top of the ridge, Lily appointed herself the person in charge of distributing crackers and water, which she did with the gravity of someone managing logistics. She handed Sienna a portion with a precision that suggested she had calculated the correct amount per person. Thank you, Sienna said. You're welcome. Lily sat down on a flat rock and looked out at the view, which was the city spread below in the pale October light, and seemed satisfied in the way of someone whose plan has executed correctly. After a moment, she said without looking at either of them, Daddy says you run a company. I do, Sienna said. How many people work there? 47? Lily processed this. Do you know all their names? I do. Another pause. Do you know things about them? Like, not just work things. Sienna looked at her. Ethan was watching, not interfering, the particular parental patience of someone who's learned that Lily's questions go somewhere. Some of them, Sienna said. I probably should know more. Lily nodded like this was an acceptable, honest answer. Daddy knows the names of everybody on his projects, even the subcontractors. She said subcontractors with the precision of a child who has heard a word enough times to use it correctly. He says if you're responsible for something, you should know who's doing it. Sienna looked at Ethan. She's going to be terrifying when she's 40, she said. She's terrifying now, he said fondly. Lily stood up and brushed cracker crumbs off her jacket. We should go back, she said. It takes longer downhill because you have to be more careful. She looked at Sienna's shoes with the same appraising quality she'd turned on them at the duck pond. Your shoes are okay for that. Good to know, Sienna said. On the way back down, Lily fell into a long and detailed account of a situation at school involving a group project, a disagreement about poster colors, and what she described as a compromise that nobody liked but everyone could live with, which she seemed to have engineered herself. Sienna listened to the whole thing without interrupting, asking one or two questions at the right moments. When Lily ran ahead to examine something on the side of the path, Ethan said quietly, "You're good with her." She makes it easy, Sienna said. She just says what she means. Most kids do, then they learn not to. Sienna thought about that. That's a depressing sentence. It is, he agreed. I keep hoping she holds on to it longer than most. I said. What nobody had warned Sienna about was the specific texture of being with someone who had a child. Not the logistics, those were manageable, but the way it reorganized time. Ethan's life ran on rhythms she hadn't had to think about before. School pickup at 3:15 meant the afternoon had a hard boundary. Lily's bedtime at 8:30 meant evenings had a shape. Sick days meant cancellations with no notice. Doctor appointments, school events, the Tuesday in November when Lily's class did a presentation and Ethan rearranged 2 client meetings without apparent stress because there was never any question about which one mattered. She watched him do it and thought about her own calendar, the year view on her project management software, color-coded by client, dense as a reef, every white space eventually colonized by something. She'd spent 7 years building a life with no give in it, and she was only now noticing that no give was another way of saying no room. She didn't say this out loud for a while. She stored it in the category of things she was thinking about. The thing that finally made her say it was a Thursday in November, when Lily had a fever and Ethan's company had a structural review meeting that could not move, and Sienna had a 2-hour gap in her schedule at noon that she would normally have filled with catch-up work. She texted Ethan at 11:15. How's Lily? Fever's down a little. Mrs. Holt is there, but she has a thing at 2. I'm going to try to get out of here by 1:30. I could go, she typed, and then held the phone for a second before she sent it. To your place, to be with her until you're done. If that's... I know that might be weird. There was a pause. Are you sure? She was, and wasn't, and sent back, I'll bring soup. She picked up soup from a place near her office. Not from a can. Not that Lily probably would have cared, but the kind made in the kitchen with a visible pot on the stove, which felt correct for a 6-year-old. She texted Mrs. Holt, got the building code from Ethan, and let herself into the apartment at 12:30. Lily was on the couch under a blanket watching the Rabbit Bakery cartoon and looked at Sienna when she came in with the measuring gaze of someone running a slight temperature who has decided to withhold judgment. Daddy texted, Lily said. He said you were coming. I hope that's okay. Lily looked at the bag in Sienna's hand. Is that soup? It is. What kind? Chicken, with little noodles. Lily appeared to deliberate. Okay, she said, and moved her feet to make room on the couch, which was the most unambiguous welcome she was apparently going to offer. Sienna sat. The Rabbit Bakery cartoon was exactly what she'd have expected. Bright, cheerful, morally unambiguous, with an emotional density that kept threatening to become more than it looked like. 15 minutes in, a bunny who had been trying to make a birthday cake for her friend had the whole thing collapse, and spent a long scene sitting on the floor of her kitchen, looking at the mess. Lily pointed at the screen. This part is sad, she said, but it gets better. Does she fix the cake? No. Her friends help her. They watched in silence until it did, in fact, get better. The friend whose birthday it was arrived and said she didn't need the cake. She just wanted to be there, and the bunny said I wanted it to be perfect, and the friend said it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. Lily looked up at Sienna. That's the good part, she said. Yeah, Sienna said. That's the good part. She heated the soup on the stove. Ethan's kitchen was small and orderly and had a specific quality of being used, not decorated, things in the places they were in because that was where they worked. And brought it to Lily in a mug because Lily said bowls were for when you were well. Lily drank about half of it and then set it on the coffee table and pulled her blanket up. Will you stay? She said. Not plaintive, just asking. Until your dad gets home, Sienna said. Lily nodded and put her head down and was asleep in 8 minutes, which was impressive, and also slightly heartbreaking in the way that sick children sleeping always is. Sienna sat on the couch with Lily's feet against her leg and looked at the apartment, at the framed photo on the wall near the bookshelf, Ethan and Lily on what looked like a beach, Lily maybe 4 years old, both of them squinting into the sun, grinning. At the row of children's books on the lower shelf arranged by size rather than author. At the kitchen where the soup pot was still on the stove. At the small bowl on the counter with keys in it and a crumpled receipt and a hair tie that was clearly Lily's and would clearly stay there until someone put it somewhere. She thought, I didn't know what I was looking for. She thought, I think I might be looking at it. Ethan came home at 1:50, still in his work jacket, and stopped in the doorway of the living room. He took in the scene. Lily sleeping, Sienna sitting still with a book she'd found on the side table, the soup mug on the coffee table. He said nothing for a moment, then, how was she? Slept about an hour. She drank half the soup. The mug? She said bowls are for when you're well. He pressed his lips together in that almost smile. Yeah. He came in and set his bag down quietly, went and looked at Lily. Just looked, the way he always did, the particular attention of someone who checks, and then came and sat on the arm of the couch. You didn't have to do this, he said. I know. I mean it. You didn't. Ethan. She looked up at him. I wanted to. He looked at her for a moment. Thank you, he said. She looked back at her book. The soup place on Meridian Street is very good, she said. I'm going to start ordering from there regardless. He was quiet for a beat. Do you want to stay for dinner? I'll make something. It won't be the soup place, but... Yeah, she said. Okay. He made pasta. The jarred sauce that Lily liked, which Sienna had been prepared to be politely neutral about, and was actually good. Or maybe what was good was the kitchen with the 3 of them in it. Lily recovered enough to sit at the table and eat half a bowl and deliver a thorough account of a dream she'd had during her nap involving a store that only sold one specific shade of blue. Ethan listened to the dream with the same quality of attention he brought to everything, asking follow-up questions. Sienna found herself doing the same. At the end of dinner, Lily looked at Sienna across the table and said, without preamble, Are you Daddy's girlfriend? Ethan made a small sound. Sienna looked at Lily. What do you think? She said. Lily considered this with full seriousness. I think you came when I was sick, she said. People do that for people they care about. That's true, Sienna said. So, Lily picked up her fork again. Probably yes, Juan. There was a night in December that neither of them planned, and both of them would remember longer than most of the planned ones. Sienna had a work event, a client holiday reception, the kind that was technically optional and functionally mandatory. And it ran late and turned complicated when 2 of her senior accounts managers got into a quiet but serious disagreement in front of a client that Sienna had to spend 40 minutes managing after the fact. She left at 10:15 with the particular exhaustion of someone who has been performing composure for 4 hours and used up everything. She called Ethan from the car without thinking about it. He answered on the second ring. Hey. Hi, she said. I'm sorry, it's late. It's fine. What happened? She told him. Not the compressed professional version, the real one. The 2 managers, the client, the specific thing that had been said, and why it was a problem, and the conversation she'd had with each of them afterward, and whether she thought she'd fixed it or just patched it, and whether there was a difference between those 2 things in a company her size. He listened through all of it, asked 2 questions, said, Do you think they can work it out, or do you need to address the structural thing? What structural thing? The reason they were willing to have that conversation in front of a client. Something's been building. That's not usually the first sign. She sat in her car in the parking garage. He was right. She knew he was right. I've been hoping it would resolve, she said. Load doesn't resolve by itself. It redistributes until something else bears it. Are you doing the engineering metaphor thing? Is it working? Annoyingly, yes. She leaned her head back. I don't want to deal with it tonight. So don't. Deal with it Monday with a clear head. What if something happens over the weekend? Then you deal with that thing. But you can't solve a structural problem on a Friday night when you're tired. She closed her eyes. How are you this sensible about things that aren't bridges? Practice, he said. Also, Lily has a lot of problems I can't fix at 9 p.m., so I've gotten good at filing things correctly. She laughed. It was the most genuine laugh she'd had in 6 hours. How is she? Asleep. She made me read the same chapter twice, and then tried to negotiate a third reading by claiming she didn't understand the ending the second time. Did you read it a third time? What do you think? Yes. Of course, yes. She sat in the quiet parking garage. Outside, she could hear the muffled sound of the city, the particular low frequency of a Friday night downtown. Ethan, she said. Yeah. I think I'm in love with you. She said it the way you say things when you're tired enough that the editing function is offline, just directly, without architecture around it. And then the silence on the line made her aware of what she'd said, and she added quickly, You don't have to. Sienna. I know it's Sienna. His voice was steady. I know. A pause. You know? I know, he said again, quietly, like a fact he'd been carrying a while and had been waiting for the right place to set down. She sat with that. The parking garage was very still. Somewhere a car door closed. Okay, she said finally. Okay, he said. I'm going to go home and sleep for 9 hours. Good. And then Monday I'm going to deal with the structural problem. Good. And she stopped. And I'll see you Saturday. Yeah, he said. Callaway's. Callaway's. She drove home into the quiet, through the lit-up streets of a city that was doing its ordinary Friday night things, groups spilling from bars, a couple splitting a cab, a man walking a dog at a pace that suggested neither of them was in a hurry. The ordinary life of a city that had been going on before she got there and would go on after, full of people doing exactly what she and Ethan were doing, finding each other by accident and choosing each other on purpose and figuring out what that meant 1 week at a time. She parked in the garage under her building, said good night to Carlos, who said good evening, Ms. Vale, because he always did. Went upstairs, stood at the window with the city lights below. She thought about a rainy Tuesday in a diner, a canvas bag from Callaway's, a bandaged hand, a woman sitting in the wrong seat who forgot to leave. She thought about how sometimes the thing that changes everything looks, from the outside, like almost nothing, a delayed text, a redirected favor, a friend who said, I don't want him sitting alone, and how inside that almost nothing was an entire architecture, load-bearing and unplanned, the kind that holds when you stop expecting it to. She didn't call her assistant. She didn't check the project management software. She went to bed at 11 and read a short story about two strangers on a train until she fell asleep with the light on. And for once, she didn't set an alarm, which meant she woke up at 5:30, the same as always, but for different reasons than usual. She lay in the early dark and thought, this is what it feels like when the gap starts to close. It wasn't perfect. The two managers were still going to be a problem Monday morning. The Aldrin pitch was still lost. The 4 years without a vacation were still 4 years. She still said exactly too much in meetings and hadn't been to Lisbon and called her mother less than she should. But the Portugal book was on her nightstand with a bookmark in it, and Saturday was tomorrow, and she hadn't missed a Sunday call home in 6 weeks. She got up at 5:30 and didn't go to her desk. She made coffee and sat on the couch and read the short story collection until the city outside got light, and it felt less like lost time than like something she was just beginning to figure out how to spend. The year did not pass cleanly. That was the first thing worth saying about it, that it did not arrange itself into a neat progression of better months, did not move from difficult to easy in any straight line. It was a year the way most years actually are, uneven, occasionally backsliding, full of ordinary problems that didn't have elegant solutions and required the kind of patience that nobody teaches you, and most people have to build from scratch. January was hard because Sienna's company went through its annual review cycle, and she had to make a staffing decision she'd been avoiding for 2 months. One of her senior account managers, the one at the center of the December reception incident, was not going to change, and she'd known that since the parking garage conversation and had kept hoping she was wrong. She let him go on a Thursday morning in the second week of January, which was the right call and felt terrible anyway, the way right calls sometimes do. She told Ethan about it that evening on the phone, and he didn't tell her she'd done the right thing. She hadn't asked him to. He just said, "How are you doing with it?" And she said, "Like I swallowed something heavy." And he said, "Yeah, that sounds right." And they stayed on the phone for another hour talking about other things, which was exactly what she needed, and which she wasn't sure she'd known how to receive a year ago. February was better. Sienna started leaving the office by 6:30 3 days a week, which her assistant director noticed and said nothing about, which was its own kind of telling. She booked a Sunday evening call with her mother on a recurring calendar invite and kept it for 12 weeks straight, which was a record. She also finally booked a flight to Lisbon for 5 days in late March. Not because the timing was ideal, because it wasn't, but because Ethan had said in November there will always be a company, and she'd decided to test whether that was true and trust the answer. It was true. The company was fine. She came back with 43 photos of Alfama taken badly from the narrow street she'd been thinking about since she was 19, and a piece of blue tile she'd bought from a market stall, and a specific quality of tiredness that was different from her usual tiredness. Not depletion, but completion. A body that had moved through the world and eaten meals and gotten lost twice and slept in a bed that was not her own and found its way back without crisis. She put the blue tile on her desk at work. People asked about it. She told them. Ethan noticed when he came to meet her for lunch the week she got back. He looked at the tile, then at her. "How was it?" he said. Loud in a quiet way, she said. He looked at her. "That's Lily's." "I know, it's the right phrase." He smiled. The full one. "Yeah," he said. "It is, son." The structural problem at Valen Group, the real one, the one beneath the account manager situation, took until April to resolve, which was 2 months longer than Sienna had planned, and about right, she thought, in hindsight. What she'd found when she finally dug into it properly was not one fault line, but several. A communication breakdown between the account teams and the creative side that had been calcifying for over a year, a set of unclear reporting lines that made everyone feel responsible for nothing specific, and two people who were genuinely talented and needed to not be on the same projects. She restructured the team in March, spent April rerunning the processes she'd let drift, lost one client who'd been planning to leave anyway, and gained two who came through a referral that the new structure made possible. It was not glamorous work. It was the unglamorous kind that holds things together. She told Ethan about it over dinner at his apartment one Thursday in May. Lily was asleep, pasta again, the jarred sauce that Sienna had now stopped pretending was a concession and admitted she actually preferred. And he listened to the whole 6-month summary with the focus he brought to everything important. "How does it feel now?" he said. "Honest," she said. "The way the company runs now feels more honest than it did a year ago. Like the bakery." She looked at him. He was right. Like finding the true thing under the noise. "Like the bakery," she said. He got up to clear the plates. She watched him do it. The ordinary motion of a man moving through his kitchen, the particular ease of someone in a place that was genuinely his. She thought about the first time she'd been in this kitchen, heating soup for Lily, looking at the framed beach photo, thinking, "I think I'm looking at it." That had been November. It was May. 7 months of Saturdays at Callaway's, of Lily's assessments growing warmer in tiny increments, of evenings that ended later than planned, of a year rearranging itself around something she hadn't budgeted for. "Ethan," she said. "I renewed my lease." He turned around, drying his hands on a dish towel. She'd moved apartments in February. Nothing dramatic, just a smaller place that was closer to his neighborhood and had a kitchen with better light and windows that faced east, which meant mornings felt different. "I know," he said. "I know you know. I'm telling you. I renewed it for another year." She looked at him. "I'm not going anywhere." He put the dish towel down on the counter. He looked at her the way he'd looked at her across the diner booth 13 months ago. That particular quality of attention, taking her seriously, not managing her. "Okay," he said. "Okay? Yeah?" He came back to the table and sat down. "I wasn't worried you were. You're very calm about things." "I'm not calm about everything," he said. "I'm calm about the things I'm sure of." She looked at him. "Am I one of those things?" "You've been one of those things since February," he said. "I just didn't want to say it before you did." She laughed, sharp and genuine. "That's the most Ethan answer you've ever given me." "What does that mean?" "It means you knew and you waited and you didn't say anything and you weren't wrong." He considered this. "Is that a character flaw?" "No," she said. "It's one of the things I love about you." She hadn't said love very many times. The parking garage in December was the first, and he'd said, "I know," which was both maddening and correct. She'd said it maybe 4 times since, always when it was simply the accurate word for what was happening. She didn't use it as punctuation. Neither did he. It made the times they said it feel like they meant something specific, which she thought was the point. June arrived, and with it the end of Lily's school year, which Ethan navigated with the same organized calm he brought to everything, arranging summer schedules and day camp and the specific contingencies that single parenting required, the way a city has to reroute traffic when one road closes. You find the next path, you don't stop moving. Sienna came to the last day of school pickup in late June. She hadn't planned to, but her 2 o'clock had canceled, and she'd been in the neighborhood and texted Ethan. He'd written back, "School gets out at 3:15. You know where it is." She did know where it was. She'd dropped Lily off twice now, on mornings when Ethan had early site visits, and she happened to be heading in that direction, which had happened to be true, and it also required minor schedule adjustments she hadn't mentioned. She stood at the edge of the pickup area in the June heat and watched the doors open and children pour out with the particular anarchic joy of people who have been released from something they mostly liked but are very glad to be free of. Lily came out in the third wave, backpack larger than she was, a drawing rolled up under one arm, hair in the usual slightly uneven braids. She spotted Sienna before she spotted her father. Sienna could tell because her face did something specific. Not surprised, exactly, but the way a face looks when something expected and wanted appears. And she changed direction without breaking stride. "You came," Lily said. "I had a cancellation," Sienna said. Lily looked at her with the 7-year-old version of the expression that said, "Sure, okay." "What's a cancellation?" "When someone changes their plans." "Oh." Lily held up the rolled drawing. "I made a map of all the countries I want to visit someday." "Can I see?" Lily unrolled it. It was hand-drawn on poster paper, countries rendered in approximate shapes with various degrees of accuracy, each one labeled in Lily's careful printing. Some had small drawings inside them. A tower for France, what appeared to be a duck for the Netherlands, an inexplicable bicycle for Australia. "Why does Australia have a bicycle?" Sienna asked. "I don't know yet," Lily said seriously, "but I feel like it should." Ethan appeared behind Lily's shoulder, slightly out of breath. He'd been at the far end of the pickup area, moved toward them when he saw Lily redirect. He looked at Sienna and then at the map and then at Sienna again. "Australia has a bicycle," Sienna told him. "I know," he said. "We've discussed it." "We haven't decided why yet," Lily said, and began rolling the map back up with authority. "Can we get ice cream? It's the last day." "That's the tradition," Ethan said. "Sienna should come," Lily said, as if this were obvious and she was mildly surprised it needed saying. She had a cancellation. Summer moved the way summers move when you're not counting them, in big warm chunks of ordinary time that don't seem significant while they're happening and become significant later. Sienna learned that Lily's favorite ice cream flavor was not, as she'd expected, something with sprinkles and chocolate and excessive engineering, but plain strawberry in a cup, eaten with a spoon, because she liked being able to pace herself. Ethan got a project that required 2 site visits a week on the south side of the city, which meant Tuesday afternoons were rerouted, and he handled the rerouting without complaint and occasionally with Sienna handling the Lily portion, which by August had become unremarkable. Unremarkable was, Sienna was learning, an underrated condition. The things that became unremarkable were the things that had become load-bearing. The ordinary structure of a life shared between people, the unglamorous weight distribution that holds everything up. She had dinner with her sister in Atlanta in August, flew down for a weekend, stayed in her sister Petra's house with the 2 kids and the husband, and the specific pleasant chaos of a home full of people who had chosen each other, and were still, 3 kids and a mortgage later, mostly glad about it. Petra had known about Ethan since February. She'd asked questions in the way of a person who needed to assess and had the right to. "What's he like?" Petra had said on the phone in March. "He showed up early to a bookstore," Sienna had said, "because parking might be bad." Petra had been quiet for a moment. "That's it? You're done." "I'm not." "Sienna, a man who shows up early because parking might be bad. You're cooked." That's a ridiculous way to assess a person. It's not ridiculous at all. It tells you everything. It tells you what he thinks about other people's time. Sienna had not argued with this because she hadn't had a good counter-argument. In Atlanta in August, Petra asked to see pictures, which Sienna showed her. Not many. She wasn't someone who took a lot of pictures. But there was one from the Harmon Ridge Trail in October. Ethan and Lily and Sienna at the top with the city below them. Lily's hand in Sienna's and her map in her other hand. All 3 of them squinting into the sun in the same direction. Petra looked at the photo for a long time. "The kid looks like you," she said. "She doesn't. She looks like her father." "Around the eyes, a little. She looks like you." Petra handed the phone back. "Or maybe it's the expression." Sienna looked at the photo. She wasn't sure what Petra meant, and then she was the particular focused, squinting look of someone who has arrived somewhere they were working toward, who was standing in the place on the map. She'd seen that expression on herself in mirrors. She hadn't known she wore it with other people. "Yeah," she said. "Maybe." Done. The conversation she and Ethan had been avoiding, or not avoiding exactly, but not rushing toward, happened on a September evening on the back steps of his apartment, which had a small concrete stoop that overlooked a narrow yard that Lily called the garden, and that contained 2 planters with herbs that Ethan grew with mixed success, and a folding chair that had been there since July. Lily was inside doing homework with a focused intensity she brought to things she'd decided mattered, and an elaborate indifference to things she'd decided didn't. And the September evening was doing the specific September thing of being perfect for about an hour before it got too cool. And Sienna had come for dinner and stayed past the dinner dishes, and they were sitting on the stoop with the last of the day still in the sky. "I've been thinking about the apartment," Ethan said. She looked at him. "Mine or yours?" "Both." He was looking at the planners. The basil had done well, the rosemary was complicated. "I've been thinking that we spend a lot of time moving between them." "We do." "And I've been thinking about what that costs, time-wise." He turned his cup. "And I've been thinking about what it would mean to not do that." She was quiet. Not because she didn't know what he meant, but because she wanted to hear him say it. "I'm not good at this," he said. "The asking for things I want. I've gotten good at not wanting things that aren't available. Different skill set." "I know," she said. "I want you here," he said. Not in a moving boxes way necessarily, yet if that's not... He stopped, breathed. "I'm saying I want you here more than you're not here. And I want Lily to... I want the version where you're not a guest, where you just live in this." He looked at her. "That's what you want?" She looked at him, at the slight tension in his shoulders that he'd learned to carry high when he was trying not to push, at the basil growing too enthusiastically in the planter, at the light going amber over the narrow garden. "I've been waiting for you to say that since February," she said. He blinked. "Since February?" "When I renewed the lease." She turned to face him more fully on the step. "I picked an apartment 8 minutes from here. I told you I wasn't going anywhere. And then I waited. I know you didn't know. You're good at waiting. I decided to let you." He looked at her for a long moment. Something in his face doing that careful settling thing, the weight redistributing. "You were waiting for me to catch up. I was letting you get there at your own pace. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes. One is impatient. The other is..." She thought about it. "The other is knowing someone well enough to know how they move." He was quiet for a moment. Then, You know me pretty well. I do. She looked at the garden. I'd like to have a key, she said. And maybe leave some things here, and we can figure out the rest as it makes sense. Yeah, he said. That works. And Lily needs to be part of the conversation. She already had it, Ethan said. Sienna turned. What? 2 weeks ago. She asked me why Sienna didn't have her own drawer here yet. He had the expression of a man who has been waiting to deliver this information. I told her we were figuring it out. She said, and I'm quoting directly, "Daddy, figuring it out means you haven't asked yet." Sienna looked at him. She's 7. 7.5, he said. The half matters. She laughed. She put her head against his shoulder and laughed in a way that came from somewhere deep and genuine and a little undone. The way you laugh when something is funny and also exactly right. And also, underneath all of that, an enormous relief. He put his arm around her and they sat on the concrete stoop in the September evening with the basil growing too fast in the planter and Lily's homework happening inside, and the year that had been accumulating behind them settling into something they could both feel. October came back around. The way October does, what, in that specific way of a season returning with all the sensory memory it carries. The smell of it, the particular slant of light. Ethan noticed it the first week and thought about the diner. He thought about it every October would, probably. The rain and the wrong booth and a woman who forgot to leave. Some things become part of how you know yourself. He'd been planning the Callaways trip for about a month, not in an elaborate way. He wasn't someone who went elaborate, which Sienna had long since understood and stopped expecting and started finding one of the truest things about him. He'd thought about it and made one phone call and let it be what it was going to be. They went on a Tuesday evening, the same as they always had on the weeks they went without Lily. Owen gave his usual nod. Sienna went to the travel section first, as she always did now, checking what was new, occasionally pulling things out and reading first pages. Ethan went to history, then fiction, then came back and found her in the travel section with a book about Iceland open across her hands. Are we doing Iceland? He said. I'm considering Iceland, she said. In winter? Especially in winter. He looked at the book. That seems cold. I know. She turned a page. I think that's part of the point. He watched her read. The way she did it. With full attention, nothing held back. The same way she listened, the same way she worked, the same way she'd sat in his kitchen on a November afternoon watching Lily sleep with her feet on Sienna's lap. All the way in, whatever she was doing. He thought about a year ago and about the woman who had not wanted to leave the booth and had said I forgot to leave, which at the time had seemed like an explanation and which he now understood was a beginning. Come here, he said. I want to show you something. She looked up from the Iceland book. He was already moving toward the back of the store, and she followed him through the fiction section, past the coffee corner with the mismatched chairs, past the children's section, the low shelves and the 1987 beanbag chair, Lily's territory, through the narrow hallway with the signed author photos on the wall, and into the small annex at the very back that most people never found because it required 2 turns and an awareness that the store was larger than it looked. The annex had 4 shelves and 3 chairs, and a window that looked into the narrow alley behind the building, and a lamp that someone had wrapped in a scarf sometime in the late 90s and never unwrapped. It was the quietest part of the store. Ethan had been coming here for years. Sienna looked around. I didn't know this was here. Most people don't. I've been coming here for a year and I didn't know this was here. You mostly stay and travel in fiction, he said, that's correct, but the store is bigger than that. She looked at the shelves, small press things, poetry collections, a few books with the specific worn quality of things that had been handled a long time. Whose section is this? Owen's, I think. The stuff he keeps because he wants to, not because it sells. She pulled a slim book out and looked at it. Poetry. She put it back. Looked at the lamp with the scarf. At the alley window, which was showing the last of the October evening, the back of a brick building and a strip of orange sky. Ethan was standing behind her. She turned. He was looking at her in a way she recognized. The Ethan version of something significant, which was not theatrical and did not announce itself, but had a specific quality of stillness that she'd learned meant he was completely present. No division of attention. All there. "I've been thinking," he said. "Okay," she said. "About the gap," he said. "The thing you talked about, between the structure and the life inside it." She waited. "I built something after Caroline," he said, "after everything fell apart. I built it very carefully and very deliberately, and I'm proud of it. It holds. It holds Lily, and it holds me, and it's a good life." He looked at her. "But it was always missing something I didn't know how to name until I was sitting across from a woman in a diner who wasn't my blind date." She was very still. "I don't want to miss it anymore," he said. "I want to build something with you in it, not around it, in it. Lily, and you, and me, and it, whatever the rest of it is, whatever we make it." He reached into his jacket pocket. "I know this is not the most conventional, Ethan. I know we've only been, Ethan." She said it with the patient firmness she'd learned worked better than anything else when he was spiraling toward unnecessary qualification. "Stop explaining and do the thing." He stopped, looked at her. Then, almost smiling, "Yeah. Okay." He took out the ring. It was not elaborate. A simple band, a single stone, the kind of thing that looked like someone had thought about what she would actually want rather than what made a statement. It was in the quiet, specific way of things Ethan chose, exactly right. "Sienna Vale," he said. "Will you?" "Yes," she said. He blinked. "I hadn't finished." "I know, yes." "You're going to let me finish." She pressed her lips together. "Fine." He looked at her with a steadiness that held everything. The rainy Tuesday, the bandaged hand, the parking garage phone call, the soup in a mug, the trail at Harmon Ridge, the September stoop and the basil and the drawer and the life that had been building itself out of a wrong seat and a forgotten departure. "Will you marry me?" he said. "Yes," she said. "Absolutely yes." He put the ring on her finger and she looked at it, and then at him, and her face was doing all the things faces do when something is both sudden and completely expected. The eyes going bright, the particular collapse of composure that isn't loss of composure, but the opposite, the expression of a person who has stopped holding something in because they don't need to hold it anymore. He held her hand. She held his back. The lamp with the scarf threw its old warm light across Owen's shelves, and the alley outside had gone fully dark, and somewhere in the main part of the store, someone was probably wondering where this section was. "I have one question," she said. "Okay." "Did Lily know?" He said nothing. "Ethan?" "She may have helped pick it," he said. Sienna looked at the ring. At him. "What does helped pick mean?" "It means we looked at some options, and she had opinions, and her opinions were good." "Of course her opinions were good. She's terrifying." 7.5, he said. 7.5, she agreed. There are things that don't get resolved cleanly, and a life together is largely built from those things. The Valen group would have hard quarters and would have good ones, and Sienna would still say exactly too much in meetings, and would still occasionally cancel her 9 o'clock for reasons that had nothing to do with work, and everything to do with a man who kept a first aid kit in his car and read about bridges. Ethan would still carry tension in his shoulders on deadline weeks, and would still sometimes spend too long in the doorway watching Lily sleep, as if making sure the structure was sound. Lily would still have complicated feelings about group projects and would still arrange her stuffed animals by emotional situation, and would still, at 7.5 and 8 and beyond, notice things that adults had decided not to see anymore and say them plainly. They would fight, eventually, in the way of people who are close enough to genuinely disappoint each other. Sienna would get it wrong about something that mattered, and Ethan would be too quiet about it for too long, and they would have to learn, separately and together, that being good at building things did not automatically make you good at the conversations where you admitted the building needed work. They would learn it. The way most things worth knowing get learned, not in a single moment, but in accumulated smaller ones, and the decision to stay in the room when leaving would be easier. But that was ahead of them, and what was true right now in the back annex of Callaway's Books and Company on a Tuesday evening in October with the lamp and the scarf and Owen's carefully kept shelves was simpler than any of that. What was true was, a year ago to the week, a woman had walked into a diner in a rainstorm and sat across from a man she'd never met and meant to stay 15 minutes and stayed 2.5 hours. A man had walked toward an angry customer because most people could, even if most people didn't. A cut on a hand had been wrapped in diner napkins by someone who'd been trying to leave all evening and kept not being able to. And something had started that neither of them had names for yet. Something quiet and unlikely and structurally sound in the way of things built slowly, from honest materials by people who know that what holds isn't always what's loudest. There is a version of this story where Sienna walks into the diner, says what she was supposed to say, and leaves in 15 minutes. Where she sits across from a stranger and keeps the boundaries she'd intended and drives home on a rainy Tuesday thinking nothing in particular. That version exists. It was available to her. She chose the other one by forgetting to. That is maybe the most human thing about any of it. Not the grand decisions, not the moments of clear-eyed courage, but the small, accidental ones. The not leaving. The saying yes when you could have said later. The taking a cracker at a duck pond. The reading Iceland travel books on a Wednesday night with no plan to go anywhere yet. Love, when it isn't being asked to perform, looks mostly like this. Two people in a bookstore taking their time, finding the sections most people miss. Sienna would go to Lisbon again the following spring, and she would bring Ethan and Lily would draw Australia with a bicycle on her map and add Portugal with a blue tile, and they would get lost twice in Alfama. The narrow streets that don't make any geographic sense, and Lily would say the city was loud in a quiet way, and Ethan would look at Sienna over Lily's head, and they would both understand what that meant. She would call her mother every Sunday and keep calling. Ethan would find his mother's soup recipe, the real one. The lost card turned up in a box in his father's garage in November, slightly water-damaged but readable, and the next time he made it, Lily drank 2 bowls and said it tasted exactly like he'd been getting it right all along, which was both untrue and the truest thing she could have said. And on a Saturday, about a year after the back annex of Callaway's, Sienna would walk into Owen's section for the second time, the first time having been with Ethan's hand in hers, and she would pull out the slim poetry book she'd looked at that night and read the first page and buy it and carry it home. Owen would say, as she paid, "Good choice," which was more than he usually said, which meant he meant it. There is no clean ending to this story because there is no ending at all, just the continuation of two people who found each other by accident and decided, every day in the ordinary way of decisions, to keep finding each other on purpose. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, the whole thing.